Hello students, welcome to second year. This is your first biology class. I am going to start with biodiversity and conservation. Coming to the introduction, the term biodiversity was introduced by an American biologist, Edward Wilson. So he is the person who gave the word biodiversity. So definition of the biodiversity is it refers to the variety of life forms and habitats found in a defined area. It represents the totality of the genes, species and ecosystem of a given region. So the meaning ಏನು ಅಂತ ಅಂದರೆ we are living in the environment which consists of different type of living organism, that is biological organisms that may be microscopic to macroscopic, which includes plants and animals. So biodiversity andre different type of life forms of plants and animals living together in a system. Coming to the levels of biodiversity, the biological diversity includes three interrelated hierarchical levels. They are genetic diversity, species diversity and ecological diversity. Let us know about these different types one by one. Coming to the first one, genetic diversity. The genetic variation existing within a species is called genetic diversity. The variation may be in alleles, total genes or chromosome structure. So the meaning of this is all the organisms are made up of different type of genes. Different type of genes we call it as genetic diversity. The difference may be in the form of alleles. Alleles means different forms of a same gene, or they may be different type of genes or the chromosomal structures. For example, they are given as mycoplasma. The genetic diversity of the mycoplasma is 450 to 700. The genetic diversity of E. coli is 4000. The genetic diversity of Drosophila is 13,000. Oryza sativa, that is rice, is 32,000 to 50,000. And Homo sapiens, the genetic diversity is 35,000 to 45,000. So all these organisms have this number of genes and they are called as genetic diversity. Why is it necessary? Different type of genes are necessary for the different type performing of different type of functions in the organism. Now we will move on to the species diversity. The diversity at the species level is called as species diversity. For example, the Western Ghats have a greater amphibian species diversity than the Eastern Ghats. The species diversity depends upon the number and richness of the species of a region. So they have taken the example of amphibian species diversity with respect to two ecosystems, that is Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats. Why so? The Western Ghats has more number of species diversity when compared to the Eastern Ghats. The reason is Western Ghats receives more number of rainfall every year, so that there is more amount of water available for the amphibians, and even the different type of plants are also present in Western Ghats. But in contrary, the Eastern Ghats receive less amount of rainfall, so the availability of water is less, and hence the amphibian species diversity is less with respect to Western Ghats. Species richness. The number of species per unit area is called as species richness. ಒಂದು ಏರಿಯಾದಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಸ್ಪೀಶೀಸ್ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಮೇಲೆ ಆ ಏರಿಯಾದ ಸ್ಪೀಶೀಸ್ ರಿಚ್ನೆಸ್ನ ನಾವು ಅಳಿತೀವಿ. Ecological diversity. The diversity at the ecosystem level is called ecological diversity. Example, deserts, rainforest, mangroves, coral reefs, wetlands, estuary and alpine meadows. So these are different type of ecosystems. So in this ecosystem there are different type of diversity of the living forms, and that we study under the ecological diversity. So now let us move on to some one or two examples with respect to the ecological diversity. The first one we can see here is rainforest. The rainforest is a type of ecological diversity where the diversity is very much, because rainforest is a region which really receives more amount of the rain throughout the year, so that with respect to this, more different type of plants are there and different type of animals are there. So the diversity of flora and fauna is more in rainforest. So here you can see mangroves and coral reefs. So mangrove is a type of ecosystem, and coral reef is also a type of ecosystem. Let us know with little bit about mangrove. So mangrove ecosystems are found in a region called as Sundarban area of West Bengal. Here the special type of plants are there, and the name of the plant is Rhizophora. What is special about it? The area of mangrove region has water which is more saline, so that the breathing is difficult for the plants. So they have special type of fruits which run above the ground towards the atmosphere, and they are called as pneumatophores for the exchange of gases. And here you can also see the coral reefs which have different type of plants and animals interrelated over here, and these are some of the examples of ecological diversity. Now we will move on to global species diversity. According to the IUCN report of 2004, the total number of plants and animal species is more than 1.5 million. So we'll see the global species diversity with respect to the graphical representation. So first, global species diversity with respect to invertebrates. Globally, the invertebrates, that is, these are all invertebrates mentioned here, crustaceans, mollusks and insects and all. But insects are more with respect to mollusks, crustaceans and other group animals. There are more number of insects in case of invertebrates globally. Coming to the vertebrates. In vertebrates, fishes are more when compared to the total amount of mammals, birds, reptiles and amphibians. The globally fishes are more. In case of plants, fungi and angiosperms are more. Fungi are very minute organisms and angiosperms are flower and fruit bearing plants. So these two are more when compared to mosses, ferns, algae and lichens. So this is a graphical representation of different type of species on the earth. So now we will conclude this topic, and next we will continue with the next class. Thank you.
Hello all, good morning. Welcome to the second biology class. So, in the last class, we had started with the topic called as biodiversity and conservation. So, what all we just recall the last class. So, we had studied about the definition of biodiversity and the various levels of biodiversity in the last class. So, the various levels of biodiversity are the genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. So, now we will go with the further thing called as patterns of biodiversity. So this is also very important in this topic. So what is the meaning of patterns of biodiversity? Biodiversity is not uniform throughout the world but shows uneven distribution. Of course, we know that all throughout the world, every type of different type of plants and animals we can see in one area, in one continent. If we see one type of plants and animals in the other continent or the other hemisphere, we cannot see such type of animals or plants, because this is based on the latitude and longitudinal gradient. So that we are going to study now. So biodiversity is affected by two factors. One is latitudinal gradient and the second one is species area relationship. So now we'll move on to the latitudinal gradient. What is the meaning of this? In general, species diversity decreases as we move away from equator towards the poles. So I will show it over here. So you know that this is the earth and this is the equator, and here is one pole and the other opposite side is another pole on the earth atmosphere. This is divided the earth hemisphere, and next to the equator you can see a region called as tropics. This is the tropics beside the equator on both the sides. Next to the tropic regions you can see temperate regions on both the sides. So next is the poles. One is Arctic pole and the other is Antarctic pole. So latitudinal gradient tells us or shows us that when we move up from the equator, away from the equator, from the equator towards the pole, if we study the earth surface, everything away from the equator, when we start moving, we can see that there is less number of species diversity. Why is it so and what is it? Less number of species diversity means the equatorial region along with the tropics has more amount of plants and animals. Different type of plants and animals are present. That is, biodiversity is rich in tropics and temperate. When compared between the tropics and temperate, tropic is near to the equator, so tropics have more amount of biodiversity and temperate is less. And when we move away from this again towards the pole, you can see very little type of plants and animals. That includes that poles doesn't have much biodiversity in it. So this is called as latitudinal gradient, which explains us that from the equator, if we move towards the pole, the number of species diversity goes on decreasing. So this doesn't apply for all the regions. There is some exceptional cases also, which we are going to study some examples. Few exceptions are the tropics harbor more species than temperate or polar areas. Colombia, located near the equator, has nearly 1,400 species of birds, while New York at 41 degree has 105 species and Greenland at 71 degree north only 56 species. So tropics Satra, near the equator, the sunlight is more, so the plants are more, but the birds doesn't like that much of heat also. So you can see that Colombia is near the equator and the birds amount to species of birds must be less, but it has more number of species of birds, that is 1,400, when compared with the New York at 41 degree north has only 105 species. New York ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ನಂಬರ್ ಆಫ್ ಸ್ಪೀಷೀಸ್ ಇರಬೇಕಿತ್ತು, ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಆಫ್ ಬರ್ಡ್ಸ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇರಬೇಕಿತ್ತು, ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಅವೇ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದ ಟ್ರಾಪಿಕ್ಸ್, ಆದರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಇದೆ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದ ಗ್ರೀನ್ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಮೋರ್ ನಂಬರ್ ಆಫ್ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಟೆಂಪರೇಟ್ ರೀಜನ್, ಆದರೂ ಕೂಡ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ 71 ಡಿಗ್ರಿ ನಾರ್ತ್ ಇದ್ದರೂ ಕೂಡ ಇಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ 56 ಸ್ಪೀಷೀಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಬರ್ಡ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ಸಮ್ ಎಕ್ಸೆಪ್ಷನಲ್ ಕೇಸಸ್ ದೇ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಮೆನ್ಷನ್ಡ್ ಹಿಯರ್. India, with much of its land area in the tropical latitudes, has more than 1,200 species of birds. India is located in the tropical temperate region on the earth hemisphere, and it has 1,200 species of birds. This is Amazon rainforest. I hope you all have studied something about the Amazon rainforest. This is commonly called as the lungs of the forest, which is made up of both tropical rainforest and temporal rainforest. ಅಂದರೆ ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ಹೆವಿ ರೈನ್ಫಾಲ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ. ಸೊ and it harbors to more and more number of species of plants and animals. So it is the rich biodiversity spot in the world. So let us know something about Amazon rainforest. There is a much more, but we'll know about a little bit. It is called as actually the lungs of the earth because minimum 10% of the atmospheric oxygen is released from the Amazon rainforest. So the largely tropical Amazonian rainforest in South America has the greatest biodiversity on earth. It is having the greatest biodiversity on the earth. ಅಂದರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅರ್ಥಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋವಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲ ಥರ ಜಾಗದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಆ ಜಾಗದಲ್ಲಿ more number of plants and animals are present. It has 40,000 species of plants, 3,000 species of fishes, 1,300 birds, 427 mammals, 427 amphibians, 378 reptiles, and of more than 125,000 invertebrates. This is the number of organisms present in the Amazon rainforest. Biodiversity, very rich. So next is greater biological diversity in tropics. So there are some hypotheses which explains that why the tropics has more number of biodiversity when compared to the temperate and the polar regions. Species area relationship. The second reason is species area relationship. So this is an important question. Every year they will be asking about this question compulsory till now. Almost 7 to 8 years they have been asking this question for 3 marks. Even this last year it was asked. So Alexander von Humboldt was a German naturalist and explorer. He observed that within a region species richness increased with increased explored area, but
only up to a limit. The relation between species richness and area for a wide variety of taxa is to be a rectangular hyperbola. He said that number of species diversity goes on increasing if we increase the area to reproduce to stay, but only up to certain level, after which it stops. So it explained with reference to the graphical representation, and it should be a rectangular hyperbola. So this is the graphical representation of species area relationship. This is a compulsory question. You are supposed to write this graph and the formula over here. So coming to the, on the logarithm scale, the relationship is a straight line described by the equation log s is equal to log c plus z log a. This is the equation where s is species richness, a is area, z corresponds to slope of the line, and c is y-intercept. Let us know with the graph. So this is the area. So this is the area. It moves like this, and this is the species richness. If we go on increasing the area, the species number goes on increasing, of course, because they get lot amount of space to survive, space to reproduce, but only up to certain level. So it starts increasing like this, only up to certain level, but after some level, if you go on increasing the area also, species richness doesn't increase, it goes on to be stagnant. So that is what it has to be. It is like this. Instead of being like this, it is like this. So this is what he explained. Importance of species diversity to the ecosystem. What is the importance of species diversity? Why does the atmosphere or the environment must have different type of species? Because the first one is to maintain the stability of the ecosystem. So we have studied about the various food chains, food webs and all, and that occurs because to maintain the stability of the environment. If there are no different type of plants or different type of animals, there won't be any food chain or food web or something like that. So that stability of the environment was difficult to be maintained. So this is one of the important of species diversity. Second one is productivity. So whatever we get to eat, to wear or something, anything, aesthetic values, anything, that is because of the productivity of the plants and animals. We use the plants and animals. Even the plants releases oxygen. It is one of the important thing. Ecosystem health. So when we have different type of plants and animals surrounding us, the health of the ecosystem also maintains. So this is the importance of the species diversity. Coming to the loss of biodiversity. Loss of biodiversity means different type of plants or animals, if they vanish, what happens? Due to human activities, biological resources have been declining rapidly. Of course, we all know that. Due to human activities, that's because of us only. We use so much of plastic, we throw it. We have so much of industries which releases toxic gases to the atmosphere. So that toxic gases are affecting the plants and animals surrounding us in the environment, even to humans also, but we are not getting it now still. The next is we throw plastic so much that we are addicted to the plastics. So what happens is the plastic is formed say a layer below the earth. In the earth surface there was no layer of plastic, but now we can see another layer called as plastic over there. So because of human activity we are declining the biodiversity. Next one is the colonization of the tropical Pacific islands by humans. So even humans are supposed to live in certain area, but what we do is we explore different type of places which was not touched also. So what happens there is when we move to the different area where it was calm and everything, we are destroying the biodiversity of that area, so that the plants and animals start dying because we occupy that place again. More than 15,500 species are facing the threat of extinction in the worldwide. Till now, 15,500 species are facing the threat, ಅಂದರೆ ಅಷ್ಟು ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಅಥವಾ ಎನಿಮಲ್ಸ್ ಥ್ರೆಟ್ ಇದೆ, ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ನಾಶ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ ಟೈಪ್ಸ್. At present, 12% of birds, 23% of mammals, 32% of amphibians and 31% of gymnosperms face the threat of extinction. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ತನಕ ಇಷ್ಟು extinction ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. These are some of the examples of recently extinct species of the last decade. 10 ವರ್ಷದ ಹಿಂದೆ ಆಗಿರುವಂಥ extincted plants, animals. Dodo from Mauritius, quagga from Africa, ಥೈಲಾಸಿನ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಆಸ್ಟ್ರೇಲಿಯಾ, ಸ್ಟೆಲ್ಲಾ ಸೀಕರೋ ಫ್ರಮ್ ರಷ್ಯಾ. ಇವೆಲ್ಲ ಈಗ ಹೋಗಿದ್ದಾವೆ, ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟಿಂಟ್ ಪೂರ್ತಿ ನಾಶ ಆಗಿದ್ದಾವೆ ಅಂತ. ಸೊ ಕಮಿಂಗ್ ಟು ದ ಮಾಸ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟೆನ್ಷನ್. ವಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ದ ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ ಆಫ್ ಮಾಸ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟೆನ್ಷನ್? ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೇಳಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ ಪ್ರಳಯ ಅಂತ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ. ಸೊ ಟಿಲ್ ನೌ ದೇರ್ ವರ್ 5 mass extinction and they are called as big 5. Due to supernatural calamities, a large number of species become extinct and which is called as mass extinction. Natural calamities, ಭೂಕಂಪ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ನೀರು ಉಕ್ಕಿ ಪ್ರಳಯ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಪ್ರವಾಹ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಇದರಿಂದ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ದಿಸ್ ಆರ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ನ್ಯಾಚುರಲ್ ಕ್ಯಾಲಾಮಿಟೀಸ್. ಅದರಿಂದ ಏನಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಲಾರ್ಜ್ ನಂಬರ್ ಆಫ್ ಸ್ಪೀಷೀಸ್ ನಾವು ಕಳ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ 5 ಥರ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ. Since the origin and diversification of the life on earth, there were 5 episodes of mass extinction of species. ಅರ್ತ್ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಷನ್ ಆದಾಗಿಂದ ಇಲ್ಲಿವರೆಗೂ 5 ಮಾಸ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟೆನ್ಷನ್ ಆಗಿದೆ and they are called as big 5, and these below 5 are called as big 5. Will not go much depth into it. Let's move to the 6th extinction. The 6th extinction is called presently in progress. We are into the 6th extinction, which is different from the previous episodes. ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂತ ಅಂದರೆ ಪ್ರೀವಿಯಸ್ ಎಪಿಸೋಡ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ಸ್ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ಸ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೂ ಕೂಡ ಮಾಸ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟೆನ್ಷನ್ 100 ವರ್ಷ 150 ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೊಂದ್ಸರಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿದೆ. ಬಟ್ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ಸ್ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟೆನ್ಷನ್ ತುಂಬ ಫಾಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಅವಾಗಿಂತ 100 ಪಟ್ಟು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಫಾಸ್ಟಾಗಿ ಅರ್ಥಲ್ಲಿರುವಂಥ ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಲಾಸ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಗ್ರೀಡ್ ಆಕ್ಟಿವಿಟೀಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ಸ್. Ecologists warn that if the present trends continue, nearly half of all the species on earth might be wiped out within the next 100 years. Of course, that is happening. ಇನ್ನು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಮಕ್ಕಳು, ನಮ್ಮ ಮೊಮ್ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಲಿಕ್ಕೇನು ಸಿಗಲಿಕ್ಕಿಲ್ಲ, ಉಸಿರಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೂ ಗಾಳಿನೂ ಸಿಗಲಿಕ್ಕಿಲ್ಲ ಅವರಿಗೆ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಅಗೇನ್ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಗ್ರೀಡ್. ಎಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಲಾಸ್. ಸೊ ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಲಾಸ್ ಆದರೆ ಎಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಏನೇನು ಆಗಬಹುದು ಅದರಿಂದ? First one is decline in plant production. Of course, plant production ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ. Next one is lowered resistance to environment perturbations such as drought. So when the production of plants less ಆದಂಗೆ ಡ್ರಾಟ್, ಮಳೆಗಾಲ ಬರಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಅಂದರೆ, ಮಳೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದಾಗ ಫೆಮೈನ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ, ಅಥವಾ ಬರಗಾಲ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಅದೇನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಆ ಬರಗಾಲ ಬಂದಾಗ ದ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಎನಿಮಲ್ಸ್ ಕೆನಾಟ್ ಸರ್ವೈವ್ ದಟ್ ಸೀಸನ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದೇ ಡೈ ವೆರಿ ಆಫನ್ಲಿ. Increased variability in certain ecosystem processes such as plant productivity, water use and pest and disease cycles. Ecosystem alli ಹಾಳಾಗ್ತಾ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ. So that plant production less ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, water usage will be more but water will be not available, and pest and disease cycles goes on increasing. Different type of diseases are formed, different type of pests are formed which harms the environment. So thank you, and the next class will complete with the syllabus. Thank you. Good morning students, welcome back to the third class of biology. We have started with the topic biodiversity and conservation. So till now we have studied about the various aspects of biodiversity. So now we are going to move with the biodiversity loss. So let us go with the causes of biodiversity loss. This is also an important question usually asked for 1 marks or 5 marks. They will fragment it and ask it for 1 marks, or whole and soul they will ask for 5 marks. So let us go with the topic now. Which are the causes for the biodiversity loss? The basic causes are habitat loss and fragmentation, overexploitation, alien species invasions and co-extinctions. So now let us go with these one by one. Coming to the first one, habitat loss and fragmentation. What's the meaning of habitat loss? Habitat means the place where the organisms live. It may be plants or animals. So for example, we will take one pond where there are lot of fishes, small fishes and big fishes both, and along with that many small lichens and small plants which are found in the ponds are present. When we destroy the pond, by any means. We can close the pond or we pollute the pond, we destroy the pond. What happens there? The organisms living in that pond will be dead because we are destroying the place where they are living, and that is called as habitat loss. Fragmentation means when there is a big ecosystem and we start dividing that ecosystem for our greed. So what happens there? Many of the plants and animals also destroy because we are destroying the natural habitat of the plants and animals. So that is called as habitat loss and fragmentation, which deals for the which leads to the destroy of the plants and animals living in that particular place. Destruction of habitat is the primary cause of extinction of species. Tropical rainforest initially covered 14% of the land, but now only 6% is present. When large-scale habitats are broken into small fragments due to human activities, certain animals are badly affected and threatens their survival. ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೇಳಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೆ ಆ ಜಾಗ ಯಾವುದು ಎನಿಮಲ್ಸ್ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಇರುವಂಥ ಯಾವುದೇ ಜಾಗನ ನಾವು ಹಾಳು ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ನಮ್ಮ ಗ್ರೀಡ್ಗಾಗಲಿ ಇದಕ್ಕಾದರೂ ಆಗಲಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂಥ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ವಾಸಿಸುವಂಥ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಮತ್ತು ಎನಿಮಲ್ಸ್ ಕೂಡ ಹಾಳಾಗಿ ಹೋಗ್ತವೆ, ಕೆಲವು ಸರಿ ನಾಶ ಆಗಿ ಕೂಡ ಹೋಗ್ತವೆ. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಓವರ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಲಾಯ್ಟೇಷನ್. ಓವರ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಲಾಯ್ಟೇಷನ್ ಅಂದರೆ ನ್ಯಾಚುರಲ್ ರಿಸೋರ್ಸಸನ್ನು ನಾವು ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ, ಯಾವಾಗಿಂದನೂ ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಬಟ್ ವೆನ್ ವಿ ಯೂಸ್ ದಿಸ್ ನ್ಯಾಚುರಲ್ ರಿಸೋರ್ಸಸ್ ಫಾರ್ more and more because of the greed of the humans, so we exploit or we deteriorate the natural resources and the organisms, other organisms which rely on these natural resources, and that's called as over exploitation. Example, stellar sea cow, passenger pigeon. Alien species invasion. The introduction of other species into one ecosystem always leads to the destroy of that original ecosystem, and that is called as alien species invasion. These two are the examples, Nile perch and the African cichlid fish. Coming to the some alien weeds, this you can easily understand, so I've taken these examples. For example, carrot grass, which is also called as parthenium, lantana, you have seen this, and water hyacinth or eichhornia. These three are some examples for the alien species in case of plants. What happens? You have seen this example with regarding to parthenium. When there is a well grown fields or lands, whether crops are growing well, suddenly you can see some parthenium plants will be there available because they are carried easily by the wind. After few days, you can see many parthenium plants in that land, which destroys the crop production, and that is called as alien species invasion. The another example is water hyacinth or eichhornia. So these are normally called as Bengal terror or terror of Bengal because these are the plants which even when they are present in the pond or any stagnant sources of water, they completely occupy the water source so that they destroy the quality of water. Because of this, the other plants and animals like fishes and small plants which are living in that pond ecosystem or water ecosystem get destroyed. This is called as alien species invasion. ಇದ್ದಂಥ ಜಾಗಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇರೆ ಹೊರಗಿನದವರು ಬಂದು ಸಡನ್ನಾಗಿ ಆ ಜಾಗನ ಪೂರ್ತಿ ನಾಶ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವೇನು ಕರಿತೀವಿ? ಏಲಿಯನ್ ಸ್ಪೀಷೀಸ್ ಇನ್ವೇಷನ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಈಸ್ co-extinctions. When a species become extinct, the plant and animal species associated with it in an obligatory manner also become extinct. ಒಂದು ಸ್ಪೀಷೀಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಸ್ಪೀಷೀಸ್ ಡಿಪೆಂಡ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ, ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಕೋ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟೆನ್ಷನ್. ದ ಮೇಜರ್ ಸ್ಪೀಷೀಸ್ ಹಾಳಾಯಿತು ಅಂದರೆ ಅದ್ರ ಮೇಲೆ ಡಿಪೆಂಡ್ ಆಗಿರೋ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಸ್ಪೀಷೀಸ್ ಕೂಡ ನಾಶ ಆಗಿ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವೇನು ಕರಿತೀವಿ? ಕೋ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟೆನ್ಷನ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್, ಇಫ್ ದ ಹೋಸ್ಟ್ ಫಿಶ್ ಸ್ಪೀಷೀಸ್ ಬಿಕಮ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟಿಂಕ್ಟ್, all those parasites exclusively found on it will also become extinct. For example, fishes ತಗೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. Some of the fishes on them have very small bacteria and all those things which are co-extensionally living, ಒಂದಕ್ಕೊಂದು ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಜೀವನ ಮಾಡ್ತಿರ್ತವೆ. ಫಿಶ್ ನಾಶ ಆಯಿತು ಅಂದರೆ ಅದ್ರ ಮೇಲೆ ಡಿಪೆಂಡ್ ಆಗಿರುವಂಥ ಅದರ್ ಆರ್ಗನಿಸಮ್ಸ್ ಕೂಡ ನಾಶ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ. ರೀಸನ್ಸ್ ಫಾರ್ ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಕನ್ಸರ್ವೇಷನ್. ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಯಾಕೆ ಕನ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ? ದೇರ್ ಆರ್ 3 reasons. One is called as narrowly utilitarian, next is broadly utilitarian, third one is ethical argument. We will briefly see about this. Narrowly utilitarian andre we depend on these ecosystem for our biodiversity for some reasons, that is economic benefits from the nature we get it, like food. We depend maximum on the biodiversity for our food, like cereals, pulses, fruits. Firewood, we need fossil fuels for firewood. Fiber, we depend on this ecosystem for fiber, medicines, construction materials, and some other industrial products. So we have to conserve the biodiversity because we need all those things to survive, but we should use them in proper way, and we should not be more greedy, and hence if we become greedy the resources will exhaust. So we have to preserve the biodiversity. Next is broadly utilitarian. ಬ್ರಾಡಾಗಿ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿದರೆ why we have to um, conserve the biodiversity, because it produces more number of oxygen. Plants produces oxygen and absorb the carbon dioxide which we leave from the atmosphere, so we need the plants. Pollination of plants occurs by the pollinators called as birds, bees, bats, animals, etc. So for pollination also we need the biodiversity, different type of animals to pollinate. And the aesthetic pleasure means, for example, take we are walking on the different two path. One is in the bare land which doesn't have any flowers or fruits or anything, we just see only bare land. And on the other contrary, we are walking on the path having greenery, different type of flowers, different type of fruits. So which makes us happy, either bare land or the path filled of greenery? Of course, it is the path filled of greenery. So we have to maintain the ecosystem because we will be happy by seeing the different type of plants and animals, so that our stress will be also reduced. Ethical argument. There are millions of plants and animals and microbes on this earth with whom we share. Ethically ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿದರೆ why we have to conserve biodiversity. There are millions of plants and animals, each are interdependent on each other. So we have to conserve or save all the type of organisms. Next is each species on this earth has some intrinsic value. When there are species on the earth means there are some value for each and every organism from microscopic to macroscopic. It is therefore our moral duty to take care of all the living creatures and pass on our biological legacy in good order to future generation. So it is our duty, being a citizen of this world, being the people on this world, we have to conserve the biodiversity, use it in a proper way, and we have to give this biodiversity maintained in a well maintained manner for our future generation, because they have to also survive here. Next is in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. This is an important compulsory question every year. Either they ask the differences between these two or they will go with the definitions. First, coming to the in situ conservation. What is the meaning of it? Conservation and protection of whole ecosystem, protection of its biodiversity at all levels. Where they are present. In situ means ಇದ್ದಂಥ ಜಾಗದಲ್ಲಿ ಅವನ್ನ ಕನ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಬೇರೆ ಜಾಗಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗಲ್ಲ, ಇದ್ದಂಥ ಜಾಗದಲ್ಲಿ ಅವೆಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ತವೆ ಅಲ್ಲಲ್ಲೇ ಅದನ್ನು ಅವನ್ನ ಕನ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಸೇಫಾಗಿ ಇರೋದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವೇನು ಕರಿತೀವಿ, ಇನ್ ಸಿಟು ಕನ್ಸರ್ವೇಷನ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ biodiversity, biosphere reserves, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, and sacred groves. These are some examples. Ex situ conservation. Protection of animals or plants when they are in danger or threatened and needs urgent measures to save from extinction. ಸೊ ಬೇರೆ ಜಾಗದಿಂದ ತೊಗೊಂಡ್ಬಂದು ಪ್ಲ್ಯಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಅಥವಾ ಎನಿಮಲ್ಸ್ನ ಒಂದು ಜಾಗದಲ್ಲಿ ಕನ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಂಥ ಹ್ಯಾಬಿಟ್ಯಾಟ್ ಬೇಕು, ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಂಥ ಫುಡ್ ಬೇಕು ಅದನ್ನು ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಪ್ರೊವೈಡ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಒಂದು ಜಾಗದಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಥರ ಪ್ಲ್ಯಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಎನಿಮಲ್ಸ್ನ ತೊಗೊಂಬಂದು ಇಟ್ಟು ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನು ಕನ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವೇನು ಕರಿತೀವಿ, ಎಕ್ಸ್ ಸಿಟು ಕನ್ಸರ್ವೇಷನ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ zoological parks, botanical gardens, and wildlife safari. For example, best we take zoo. Zoo you can see very different type of animals. How? Because we take different type of animals from different parts of the world and conserve it in one place, and that is called a zoo, where we provide the natural habitat which they sustain and the food which they like, and that is called as ex situ conservation. Conventions on biodiversity. This was asked this year, question for 1 marks. The Earth Summit was held in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. This was the important Earth Summit which was held in Rio de Janeiro, South Africa in 1992. The World Summit on Sustainable Development held in Johannesburg, South Africa in 2002. In this summit, 190 countries pledged their commitment to reduce the current rate of biodiversity loss at global, regional, and local levels by 2010. Almost 10 years back, it was happened, where 190 countries ಕಮಿಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಏನಂತ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಲಾಸ್ನ ಎಷ್ಟು ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಅಷ್ಟನ್ನು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂತ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ completes the topic biodiversity and conservation. Thank you.
Hello all, welcome back. This is the recap of biodiversity and conservation in a short form, which is important from the exam point of view. So coming to the definition of biodiversity, it is defined as variety of life forms and habitats found in a defined area. It means different type of living organism. It may be unicellular or multicellular, plants or animals. These type of organisms which are found in a specific area or specific ecosystem and in different type of habitats, and that is called as biodiversity. So next important question is regarding the levels of biodiversity. So the biodiversity is described by 3 levels. The first one is genetic level, next is species level, and the third one is ecological level. First, coming to the genetic level of biodiversity. Genetic variation existing within a species is called as genetic diversity. What's the meaning of within a species? Just take an example of us only. We human beings are multicellular organisms. We are made up of different type of genes. Why? Because we need all those genes to control the different functions of the body. So this explains the genetic diversity with respect to the genes. Next is species diversity. It defines as diversity at the species level. So we have taken the example of a species with amphibian species with respect to the Western Ghats and Eastern Ghats. Next is ecological diversity, means diversity at the ecosystem level, because we can see different type of ecosystem existing on this earth. All the ecosystem has different type of species, either plants or animals, with respect to the temperature, sunlight, rainfall and all those things, and that is called as ecological diversity. Next, coming to the patterns of biodiversity. The biodiversity, how it is organized. So it is organized into 2 types of patterns. One is latitudinal gradient and the other is species area relationship. Coming to the first one, latitudinal gradient. It means species diversity decreases as we move away from the equator towards the pole. This is what is explained here. So towards the equator we have temperature which is high and the sunlight is more. So the plants require more number of temperature or sunlight. So the amount of plants we can see here is more. So that is diversity of plants is more. Since the diversity of plants are more, the diversity of animals are also more near the equator, temperate or tropical regions. Why? Because plants or animals are dependent on the plants for the food and everything, shelter and all, and the plants are dependent on the animals for the pollination, etc. So we can see rich biodiversity near the equator. But when we move away from the equator and when we move towards the poles, the biodiversity goes on decreasing, because towards the pole means the temperature is very low. It goes to the minus something degrees, and hence the sunlight is very less. So the amount of plants and animals are less. So biodiversity decreases when we move from equator towards the poles, with some exceptions I have mentioned here. Some exceptional cases are there where biodiversity is different in different locations. Some exceptions are there. Next one is species area relationship. This was given by Alexander von Humboldt. He explained that within a region, species richness increased with increasing explored area, but only up to a limit. We can see in the graph,
there is a graph against area and species richness. We also know that when the area goes on increase, species richness also goes on increasing. But how much? If we go on still increasing the area, but the species richness cannot go on increasing. It increases only up to certain level and then it starts or stops or becomes the stagnant. It was explained by a equation log s is equal to log c plus z log a. S is species richness, A is area, Z is slope of line, C is y intercept. This is species area relationship, and this is an important question. Every year it will be asked for 3 marks. Importance of species diversity. Why we need different type of species in the ecosystem? To maintain the stability of the ecosystem, to increase the productivity of the ecosystem, and ecosystem health, and to maintain the health, because all this gives different good amount of air to the atmosphere. Causes of biodiversity loss. There are 4 different causes for loss of biodiversity. First one is habitat loss and fragmentation. Second, overexploitation. Third one, alien species invasion. Fourth, co-extinctions. Coming to the habitat loss and fragmentation. What is the meaning of this? If we go on destroying the habitat where the organisms are present, then the organisms also die there, because we are destroying the place where they are living or dwelling. So it leads to the loss of biodiversity. Overexploitation. So we use natural resources, but these are meant to be used for only certain amount which is required, but because of the greed we are overusing the resources and we are making it empty. So because of this we are destroying the biodiversity again. Alien species invasion. Different type of plants or animals, when they invade from one region to another region, different region only, they destroy that area only by occupying it completely, and that is called as alien species invasion. The last one, co-extinctions. Or many of time what happens in ecosystem means all the many organisms are living together like one obligatory manner, one helps the other organism. But in here what happens, if the main organism dies, the other organism which is completely dependent on this main organism will also die, and that is called as co-extinction. Reason to conserve biodiversity. We have to conserve biodiversity because of narrowly utilitarian, broadly utilitarian and ethical argument. What is meant by narrowly utilitarian? Narrowly utilitarian means we depend on biodiversity for food. Animals depend for again food like fodder. We need resources, we need coal, we need fiber, we need cotton and all those things. That is called as narrowly utilitarian. We have to use these resources, but we have to conserve them also. It is our prime duty. Broadly utilitarian. When we think broadly, why we have to conserve biodiversity? Because when we conserve biodiversity, many animals live, many plants live, and the plants are the major source of oxygen for us, food for us. So we have to conserve the biodiversity. Ethical argument means we use this biodiversity for many of our purposes to live, and it is our moral duty to conserve this biodiversity, to protect this biodiversity and pass on this legacy to our next generation, so that they also have to live, survive along with the plenty of biodiversity in the nature. Coming to the in situ conservation. There are 2 types of conservation. The one is in situ conservation and the other is ex situ conservation. What is in situ conservation? Conservation and protection of whole ecosystem and its biodiversity at all levels in order to protect the threatened species. This is the definition. When we go on to simply means, the simple definition is conserving and protection of the biodiversity in the place where it is existed, and that is called as in situ conservation. Example, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, etc. Ex situ conservation. Conservation and protection of selected rare plants or animals in places outside their natural homes or natural habitats. We take some of the animals and plants from the natural habitat, and we put into we conserve into in other places where by providing the habitat, the food, everything which is necessary for these organisms, and it is called as ex situ conservation. Example is gene bank, botanical garden, zoo, etc. And the last but not the least, this is an important question again, revert Popper hypothesis. This is usually asked for 3 marks. Or it is again a reason for conserving of biodiversity. It was proposed by panel Paul and H. Lirch. He compared this ecosystem with the aeroplane and the species of the ecosystem into the different parts of the aeroplane. An aeroplane which is considered as ecosystem has thousands of reverts. Reverts means species. Removal of these reverts means removal of the species from the ecosystem by the passengers one by one. Imagine one by one passengers removes the one by one these different parts of the aeroplane. What happens? At the initial level, aeroplane is fine, but if we go on doing this for a later, like removing the main parts of the aeroplane like wings and all those things, the plane will become dangerously weak over a period of time. If critical parts like wings, that is species performing major ecosystem functions, are removed, will pose a various serious immediate threat to the safety. Main parts if we remove from the aeroplane become destroyed. It cannot fly. The same way, the main species from the ecosystem, if they are removed, which performs a major duty in the ecosystem, when they are removed, the ecosystem will be destroyed. This is compared to the functioning of an ecosystem. So this was asked for one or twice till these dates for 3 marks. Thank you. So if you have any doubts, you are free to ask and through my mobile number. Thank you.